Hello, everyone. It's Jennifer McCollum with Parent Teens, and I am here today with Kirsten Cobabe, who's a social worker and also the creator of Raising Unicorns and the Raising Unicorns method, which I can't wait for you all to hear about. Hello, Kirsten.
Hi, Jennifer. Thank you for having me. It's really nice to be here.
Well, it's an honor to have you here. Now, tell us how you got into raising unicorns, creating that whole method, and how you became the coach for parents of teens.
Okay, let's go back to, I started as a social worker. My professional training is in social work, and I really have always just loved that realm, supporting people. I've been supporting people since I was a young person myself. And I was really fortunate to have some amazing mentors along the way, because there were some aspects of that realm that were tricky for me, and my didn't totally align with my approach. So I was so fortunate to have some mentors and some guides that really encouraged me to continue being me in that world of social work. So I got through my requirements, and I was very kind of present to the truth that my approach was a little bit different. And what I mean by that is, actually, I saw this, when I worked in the mental health field. So there were a lot of doctors and psychologists, and I would see basically people getting labeled as numbers and diagnoses with a very small amount of time the doctor spent with them. It was very immediate, and there was the label and there was the whole treatment plan. And I, had spent so much time with these people and saw the kind of full spectrum of that human, like every facet. And so sometimes that stuff didn't really fit. And not that labels aren't okay, not that they can't be helpful, and all of that stuff. I think that, medication and labels can be really helpful. However, what I ended up seeing was there was this lack of relationship and connection. And so people that I worked with weren't actually being open with the doctors. So they weren't even getting the correct information. Either they weren't sharing much, or they weren't sharing honestly, because they didn't have that relationship. So this really just continued to highlight my approach that I already had intuitively, which was this, like, it's all about the relationship. Everything comes back to that. Without that, nothing really works. We can try to pull people in different directions. We can try to change them. But without a relationship, you're going to get someone who's either resistant or just gives you fluff. And what we really want is to have this person feel like they can be themselves. So we have to be ourselves and show up presently for this person to be able to create that connection. So my focus is really all about presence. And that's how I've kind of come to this Raising Unicorns place. I've been teaching these tools and methods for a long time. For a while, it was in private practice, before I kind of switched gears into more coaching and counseling, for a little more flexibility for the most part with my people. And so I've started to teach parents and now counselors and other people about this way of just genuinely being with someone, so that they can genuinely be with us, and have a more authentic experience. So, that's kind of how it came about, and how I'm here now and what I'm doing now. So it's kind of my mission to encourage people that work with young ones, or who have young ones, as a parent or a guardian, to really help be a guide as this person is waking up to life and creating their new identity. It's a very sensitive age range, as we all know, and there's lots of developmental stages. So really being able to ride the waves of adolescence, learn the tools to be able to do that and to stay present is kind of my mission here. And this all really came about, actually, I was very aware of this, but then I started hearing more and more stories about the incredible rise in anxiety and depression and suicide that teens are experiencing now. In fact, this is up 200% from 10 years ago, which is significant. And the age range is actually younger than ever. I mean, it's not even in the teens. It's not even in the tweens. Like, this stuff is happening early. So I just couldn't sit with myself without doing something about that, and bringing this method that I've seen work so well into really I needed to bring it forward in a way that more people could have access in an affordable and accessible way. So that's kind of how we got here.
And I love that. I think that's, well, there's a couple reasons that I was drawn to you. One is that you really do focus on the communication and the presence. And I do understand that being key in my family, and I know in many others. So I love that that's your focus, and that is the method that you've created. The other thing that really drew me to you is that you have created a course that people can have access to right now. And I think when we're parenting teens, we need answers and help. And I feel like a lot of people that come to me are in, they're in the midst of it, and they need support right then. And I love that you have a course that parents can access. You have a free download on your site, and then it takes you to the opportunity to be a part of a course, which I know every stage can really benefit a family if you have teens. So a couple of those, things that drew me to you, and that you have a whole, focus on that communication. Now, I know today you want to share 3 areas with us that can really help us as we're parenting teens. Let's dive into that, because these
Awesome.
are really valuable tips that I can't wait to share with the parents listening in. So what would the
Great.
number one tip be as we're raising our teenagers?
The number one that I'm focusing right now is really connected to anxiety and depression, but also social media. So there's a lot happening right now in that conversation of social media devices. There's a struggle there. There's a power dynamic. There's all kinds of research, and it's very new, obviously, because this is the first really wave of teenagers that's had smartphones since forever. So, or in
Right.
this very sensitive age range. So, my kind of approach is that yes, there's some issues there with like addictive behavior, overuse, things like that. But I dial it way, way, way back and bring it back to what I mentioned earlier, which is this relationship and connection. So what I'm seeing and what some of the studies are telling us, and what I believe in my heart and in my work with young people, is that that reach for the device is really because we're lacking this connection, this actual connection, whether it's with our parents, with our teachers, with school, with society, with a passion, with ourselves, whatever it is. That's the quick fix and the go-to. Like, okay, that's how I'm going to connect. We can connect in a blink of an eye with a cell phone. It's
Right.
not the same, of course, which is then why these other issues are happening. But what we're seeing is the real root causes is lack of connection. So of course our young people are turning to devices when they're feeling alone. It's very easy to do that, which is also why when we take their phones away, we see this really intense response. So my kind of point number one is to really just be aware of that. That this is a symptom of something deeper. It's really about a lack of connection. And what's important there to note is that it, again, kind of a lot of my work ties back into this relationship and creating expectations together, involving our teens in this, because when we tell them to grow up, but then we take away their belongings, it's this very like, am I a kid? Am I an adult? And we have them in this back and forth kind of power struggle that can be really confusing, and then it creates more resentment. So I really want to highlight that, because I think cell phones are getting and devices are getting like all the blame, and the young people are getting the blame, when really they're just showing us that we all have an issue here. There's an issue of a lack of connection in our
Mhm.
society, and they're revealing this to us. So instead of blaming them, really kind of seeing it compassionately, and then having a conversation about it, creating guidelines together. And usually we see their maturity shine through when we welcome them into creating this stuff with us, creating the expectations. The maturity just usually blows our minds. So that's kind of my point number one, is that yeah, this social media is really tied into this lack of connection
Mhm.
and anxiety that
Mhm.
young people are experiencing in the modern day busy, uncertain world we're in.
Right. And I love that your suggestion was to bring them into the conversation about it, to set those guidelines. I think that's something that often you're right, like we miss out on. They do something wrong, we take away their phones or their electronics, whatever that is, if it's video games or anything else. Instead of like bringing them into a conversation, because um they are growing up and we need to teach them how to be able to make those choices themselves. But if they have a say in it, I think that can be a lot more powerful than us standing there saying, you need to do this, which I know for a fact
Absolutely.
doesn't work.
It doesn't. It's so true. And, and then it's confusing because it's like, well, they're like, you're telling me to be a grown up, but then you're
Mhm.
taking away my stuff. And we would be confused in that too if our boss was doing this to us or something. So they're really just kind of revealing like this. Yeah, it's a societal thing. We're all addicted to our devices, and a lot of us are feeling a lack of connection. So we also need to be accountable and look at our own experience with devices and with connection in our lives. How are we balancing these things? So
Right.
they're seeing us and we're modeling for them. And
Mhm.
that's just the way it works generationally.
And that's great. And I think that point kind of segues into your second point, or tool or guideline for us as we're raising these teens, which is
Yes, presence is like the beginning of how a relationship is formed. So, um, one of the best ways, because presence is kind of like vague, a little ethereal. It's like, what does that mean? How do I do that? And so I like to really focus on tangible, actionable ways to engage and to start these things and initiate. So, being present in our communication is one of the best ways to invite more presence into our relationship and really have it become a more normal way of being. And so often when we're communicating, especially if we're stressed out or there's something going on with our teenager or the young person we're helping, we can be like, overwhelmed, and forget. And we tend to go into this, we got to change their mind. What am I going to say next? So we're not actually listening to the person.
Mhm.
Um, and they might not even be talking. Sometimes listening is listening to what they're not saying, it's listening to what they're doing. So it's not always words, especially with teenagers.
Mhm.
Um, but sometimes it is, and sometimes it swears, and sometimes it's crazy. But really can, really being present in that communication, what's happening, what's not happening. And then what we end up doing is seeing our own process, what we're letting go of, what it's bringing up for us, and we're able to actually have that internal experience with ourselves and become more present so that we can show up for that young person. And all of us know, when we've all been like on the ground, just done, stressed out, totally overwhelmed, or we're sick or in the hospital. We've all been in those really tricky situations. And
Mhm.
when someone can just sit there with us, that's like the most magical thing that we can have happen. That's like, I'm here with you. And that's teenagers. That's usually what things feel like for them because of this developmental stage. Um, Scientifically, when there's bullying happening or catcalling or something really tragic in the social realm for them, it actually registers in the brain like a punch in the gut. And
Mhm.
so they feel physically like they're physically in pain when they're emotionally in
Mhm.
pain. That's just how it works for them. So it's just kind of, we can take a step back and say, wow, what's really worked for us when I've been in that awful, awful place. And it's someone just being there with us. Um, so that's what I really encourage is that, we just show up presently, look at the communication aspect of it. How can we like tangibly really tackle this? And it's just watch what we're saying, watch what we're doing, notice if we're cutting them off, apologize when we do. That stuff goes so far with young ones.
Mhm.
And a lot of us, we're doing this because a lot of us grew up with parents that weren't present. It's just we're repeating a pattern, and it's not because anyone was wrong or bad. It's just because life is busy. There's no class in high school about how to be present in a relationship. So
Mhm.
we're remembering this together, and we're unlearning what we all learned. So
And I
that's
like how you say that presence is the present.
mm.
That's pretty powerful right there. I'm going to remember that, those moments when I want to take out my phone, or when I'm half listening or talking over, one of our kids, that I will try and remember that.
We've all done that. And
Mhm.
it's so important. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be present. And so that really can lift a lot. That's a lot of weight off our shoulders.
Right.
And of course, if there's a moment when it's like there's a safety issue, it's a different kind of presence. And if we need a break from something, we can be like, hey, I'm overwhelmed. I'm going to take a walk and I'm going to come back to this. But that's presence too. We don't have to physically be there in every second for there to be presence. We can take a step back if needed so we can come back fully. And that's a beautiful thing to model for young people too.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be perfect. We can apologize. That's a beautiful thing to do. And when we notice we're pulling our iPads and cell phones, it's really this like quick fix, just like junk food as opposed to real food. It's a quick
Mhm.
fix for that connection.
Mhm.
So yeah. Yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just
Doesn't
present.
have to be perfect. Never is.
Nope. No, never is
Well,
and always is. It's that strange
mhm.
dynamic.
And I think what you're talking about, like just modeling, like, walking away, modeling for them, that kind of moves us right into your third point, which
Yeah.
is, we had a little conversation before we started recording. And so tell us about the third point.
Sure. The third point is this: if we really want to enhance our connection and have an open, an open, present, just like radically connected connection with our young people, which most people do. We fantasize about this, you're like, oh, I'm going to have this amazing relationship with my child. So
Mhm.
we forget that there's waves of this and we want it to kind of be perfect all the time. This is how we all are. But really being aware of our own stuff. And this doesn't mean we have to heal everything right away or do all this therapy, which you can, of course, and that's beautiful. But this bringing awareness to our own stuff, whether you're a teacher or a counselor or a parent, what's triggering us, because that's something that's ours. It's not them. If they're triggering us, that's actually, if we think that they are triggering us or pushing our buttons, it's actually a sign for us to be like, oh, okay, what's important to me? So if they're not cleaning their room, it's not because they are trying to, I mean, typically they're not trying to make things worse. If we're
Mhm.
triggered by that, it's because we value a clean house. So it's this, if we're triggered, it's something going on here. So just being aware of that. It doesn't mean we have to fix it all and be perfect. I'm so just an advocate for being open and aware and bringing that conscious awareness into wherever we are, because there's so many things throughout the day that can really throw us off, especially living with young people. So it's really it's
I
really
think
this
we're all nodding here. Yes.
everyone's nodding. Living with anyone else, it's just like, of course stuff's going to come up. And
Right.
that's really just this sign for ourselves of what's important to me. So, and it brings back to that other point of calling in the young person to create the expectations in the home. It's amazing how well they respond to being asked, hey, what do you think? What would you like it to be like? If they're not into laundry, maybe they're into doing stuff in the yard. Like, make it, we can connect it to something that they find valuable, because they're going to have different values than us.
Mhm.
Yes, they came from us, unless they're adopted, but it doesn't mean they're going to be like us. They're their own unique unicorn.
Mhm.
They're totally an individual, and it's finding that place to connect, about how to have that harmonious home. So values is a big one there, and being aware of our own stuff, and calling them into that conversation. Um, so when we're aware, we can actually respond rather than react. And when we respond, this actually just continues to keep us in the present. The reacting yanks us right out of it, and then it yanks them right out of it. And then it's,
Mhm.
as we all know, then it's like a giant mess. So
Yeah.
that would be my third point is, this awareness piece.
Mhm.
We've got to do our own work, because again, they're just showing us what's out of balance, because they don't have the same filters that adults have learned to hold it together. They're like, no, this isn't working.
Mhm.
Whether it's behaviorally, verbally, or non-verbally, and avoidance. So how we can bring that balance back in.
That's wonderful.
Mhm.
Now, all three of those tips, I know you have so many more. And I did ask Kirsten to like narrow it down for us because there's so much in that course that you offer. So and I should say after we're done chatting, I'll have a PDF available of those points with a short description for everyone. I love that you gave us some really actionable tools to use for each one of those steps. And then I will provide links to how you can find Kirsten on the Parent Teen site, access the download and the course as well. So to
Awesome.
sum it all up and to leave us, I know you've given us so much to think about, but to leave us with one final word, something that gives us the opportunity to make a difference right now. I like to call them quick wins because
Mm.
in our busy family, we need a lot of quick wins. So what would you suggest, Kirsten, to be a quick win for parents of teens right now?
Something that has always stuck with me in my work as a social worker, one of my guides, like I said, I had amazing mentors that really got it. And one of them would say when someone was struggling with a client or something, um,
Mhm.
with a person, he would just be like, how's the relationship? He would
Mhm.
just ask this over and over again until the person could come back into that place. And then it was usually the response was, oh shoot, it's like not very good actually. Like this happened and that happened and this and that.
Mhm.
So that is like just a good check-in too. If we're feeling, sometimes it's nice to have like a go-to sentence, whether it's be here now or something like that. But we can
Mhm.
even just say, hey, how's my relationship? How's this relationship? How is that? And then it brings us into this contemplative internal state where we can kind of review how things are going. And then it will typically remind us, oh, yes, that's right. I've got to focus on the relationship. And
Mhm.
then we're reminded of the presence and the connection and all of these other things that we've talked about. So that would be what I would leave you with. That, and it doesn't have to be perfect, just present.
Oh, I'm writing that one down. It doesn't have to be perfect.
No.
Um,
Yeah.
I will put that on a sticky note on my computer.
I love it. I have some wallpaper images for cell phones, and that one's my next one too. So that's another good thing. If you want to come to my Instagram page, there's free tips there. There's also free wallpaper that you can just plug into your phone. It's nice to have those reminders. I do it for
Oh,
myself. Yep.
awesome.
Those can be helpful because then we're getting that subliminal or that external reinforcement of a positive, reminder or something that can keep us present. So I have that stuff on my Instagram page, which is Kirsten Cobabe or raisingunicorns.co. And yeah, I recommend people take this course because if you really want that closer relationship and the tools where you can have that relationship
Mhm.
throughout the waves of adolescence, like these are the tools that work in a sort of blanket way, not to say that everyone's the same because they're not. Everybody is so unique and things do need to be tailored, but we can be their cheerleader or we can be their enemy in this developmental stage, and we get to choose. And so yeah, the course just has lots of actionable tips in there for whether you have a 13-year-old or a 19-year-old.
That's awesome. I definitely want to be the cheerleader. So thank you so much, Kirsten, for joining us. And thank you for sharing all of your wonderful goodness with us. And again, I'll provide the links after so you can have a look at that course and find Kirsten and even that wallpaper on your Instagram. I think that's fabulous. So thank you so much. Please come back again and share more with us. You've given us lots to think about, and I really hope to see you again.
Oh, great. Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks for having me. And I'm here if anybody needs me. So feel free to reach out. And thank you again for having me. It was lovely to meet you.
That is wonderful. We'll see you again.
Okay, sounds good. Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.